Oh, hey Trunks. I was just about to call you. Yep, just like you told me to, I completed the mission. I took down the bad guys whose power was higher than it should have been. What do you mean? Wait, what? Oh, I gotta come back and start from the beginning. Yeah, I'll see you when I get back. Goddamn Saiyan monkey. Before the Xenoverse community crucifies me for not being a true fan by just reading the title, hear me out for just a second. The first anime I ever watched was Dragon Ball Z. I was maybe 6 or 7 and I happened to see this big man with weirdly spiky hair tearing off his shirt and getting covered in flames. His muscles started bloating up like a balloon and he started wailing on the short man with white skin who kept calling him Monkey. And immediately, I was in love. I was excited. I was looking for more. Like a crack addict looking for his next hit. I would browse the internet for more Dragon Ball stuff in an age when even downloading a JPEG would take like 10 minutes. I was honestly obsessed to the point that I would only draw Dragon Ball stuff all the time. Fan comics, fan art, OCs, you name it, I did it all. Until one day, my dad got me a PlayStation 2 and I started playing Budokai 3. And then I wanted even more. I went out to the local street vendor who used to sell PlayStation games burned on DVDs for like $1. And this one fine day, I picked up a disc for Budokai 2. But it wasn't Budokai 2. Turns out, it was Budokai Tenkaichi 3. There are happy accidents, and then there is leaving your house with a maxed out luck stat for the day. Tenkaichi 3 was my favorite game of all time for a long time. And I always wondered how cool it would be to make your own character in Dragon Ball. In fact, when I was in school, me and my friends used to play a D&D style Dragon Ball game in our breaks where our DM would pull out random transformations out of his ass, keeping true to the spirit of the show. And then many years later, when I had stopped being crazy over Dragon Ball due to a lack of content, Xenoverse dropped. The only game that allowed you to create characters in Dragon Ball. I said the only game that allowed you to create characters in Dragon Ball. You are following the story of Dragon Ball Z, but with enough of a twist to keep it fresh and interesting. Once again, I was relapsing to my crack addict ways, looking for another score of that sweet Dragon Ball action. And then Xenoverse 2 dropped, and I was extremely underwhelmed. I think from a technical standpoint, Xenoverse 2 did everything better than Xenoverse 1. The drop rates were much more balanced for items. The combat was much better with actual combos. Super Saiyan was not just a gateway to spamming infinite ultimates. And races others from Saiyans also finally got some love. We were able to see enemy ki and stamina so we can plan out our moves. We could finally equip an outfit without worrying about stats. Super Souls gave you different types of ki blasts. We had a bigger map for the hub area. And there was so much more to do, like joining the Frieza Force, or working with the Great Saiyamans, training with different mentors who could finally spawn in a fixed spot. There was so much to Xenoverse 2 that made it feel more alive compared to Xenoverse 1. And yet something felt lacking, and it wasn't just the visuals. I mean, okay, are we all really not gonna talk about the weird plastic looking Dragon Ball models that we have been getting for the last decade? Why is everything so shiny? Who started it? Was it you? Who thought this was a good art direction? I think it looks like shit. Thank God they fixed it in those pretty cutscenes later on, and most of the modern games do not go with this plasticky look. But I still wish the game really looked like those modern cutscenes. That'd be fantastic. That would be the ultimate Xenoverse experience. But anyways, the visuals are not as bad as I make them out to be. I do have a personal bias against them, but they're really not a deal breaker or anything for the game. The game has a lot more to offer other than the visuals. The main problem is the story of Xenoverse 2. Because at the bare bones level, it is a rehash of Xenoverse 1. Now, I'm not talking about DLCs. I think DLCs are handled well enough, and that includes some of the stuff for Super 2. Except for Black. I still think a great way to make the plot of Black in Xenoverse interesting would be to have the immortal Zamasu either have the Xenoverse 2 protagonist body or the Toki city hero's body. It would have made it a lot more interesting, at least in my opinion. But anyway, the biggest problem I have with Xenoverse 2 is that the story doesn't do enough to differentiate itself from Xenoverse 1, aside from a few fights. Now, to its credit, Since Xenoverse just follows the main Dragon Ball Z story with slight alterations, it's understandable that there is a limit to how much they can shake things up, since they do want the newer audience to catch up with the main story of Dragon Ball Z. And that's a fair argument for the game. The problem is, this kind of creates a disconnect for returning players who are excited to play a true sequel to Xenoverse and end up feeling like they are just playing the first game again, but with a few quality of life patches and some minor changes. At least that's how I felt. A lot of the changes in the game are honestly just a variation of it's just the same fight except the enemy is a lot stronger. Ooh. To its credit, having movie villains be from an alternate timeline who happen to participate in the mainline events is an interesting way to differentiate it from the first game. But in my opinion, the game still tries to play it a bit too safe. To break it down to its core concepts, the main difference in the story for Xenoverse 1 and 2 is fairly simple. Xenoverse 1 is about time being completely messed up and the Supreme Kai of Time needs someone to come in and help them out. Xenoverse 2 is about the events of Xenoverse 1 leading to hiring many more time patrollers to make sure that time doesn't get damaged as badly and also to fix up any issues that may pop up. On a conceptual level, it works fairly well as a sequel. It's a setup that's been explored in the first game and this is the aftermath. The problem is, Towa and Mira never feel important in their own story. In a story where they are supposed to be the main antagonists, they don't feel as important at all. In the first game, Demigra was this looming threat ever coming closer with Towa and Mira playing second fiddle to him. In this game, they are the main villains, but they somehow still feel secondary because the game focuses more on the movie villains. It's just a bit too similar to the first game. In fact, there are scenes in the game that happen beat for beat exactly like the first one. In fact, they quite literally use the exact same cutscene from the first game. And that's not something that I'd expect from a sequel. It really feels like they just used their old homework but changed it up a bit so it's not easy to notice. It's just, oh, it's that bad guy but stronger. Or, oh, it's that bad guy but stronger, but we also have a movie villain coming in at the same time. If we look at the first Xenoverse game in comparison, they did some really interesting things. For example, having Mr. Satan be superpowered during the Cell games and unable to control himself is something unique and silly, but it's also a fun concept. Having the weakest guy in Dragon Ball be a legitimate boss fight, it's interesting, it's fun, it's wacky. It's very Dragon Ball. Ginyu stealing the created character's body is interesting too. And while I do appreciate the humor in him taking Trunks' body, this is a post-Cell games Trunks. Even if he were not able to control his true strength, everyone on Namek should be getting one shot. And that's not even the worst. Turles and Slug, who almost seem like the secondary main villains and have this looming presence throughout the first two arcs of the story, don't even play a major role. And they just kind of die in the middle of a mission and that's it. The story is over. The world building in Dragon Ball is wacky enough with its crazy story that you can make some truly fantastic what ifs, and yet Xenoverse 2 sticks to some really safe and honestly not as interesting changes. We don't always need to follow the Goku vs Raditz to Goku vs Kid Buu formula, especially in a game like Xenoverse where the what ifs are what make or break the game, at least for me. For instance, imagine if maybe Goku's Spirit Bomb did kill Frieza, so you have to help Frieza now to fix things. There's a lot you can do with the idea of what ifs in a story like Dragon Ball. But unfortunately with Xenoverse 2, it's mostly all just generic slop of, oh, it's a villain that we fought before but he's stronger now. Even Mira, who is arguably the main villain of the entire Xenoverse saga, is kind of a bland boss fight that feels like a rehash of Demigra from Xenoverse 1 with Goku coming in and helping you. And his design is not interesting either, it just kind of feels like a copy-paste of Super Saiyan 4. All in all, I feel like it really could have been more than it was, and that sucks because as someone who loves Dragon Ball, I wish the story was unique and interesting, but it's really not. A big factor in Toriyama's writing style is that he never reused ideas. Well, almost never. He kept the material fresh despite its repetitive nature. It's why a lot of times in Toriyama's writings, characters will use a technique once and they will never use it again, which, yeah, it's kind of detrimental to the world building sometimes, but that's what made Toriyama's writing interesting. He always kept it fresh and unique, so whenever a reader is reading the manga or watching the anime, they really never know what to expect, at least in original Dragon Ball. In Z, it's a little bit more of Super Saiyan, Ki Blasts, bad guy, transformations, and rinse and repeat. But regardless, those are just my thoughts on Xenoverse 2. What do you guys think? Do you guys think Xenoverse 2 had a good story? Do you think it had a bad story? Or maybe you guys think Xenoverse 2 is the kind of game where the story doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's just about making your own OC and fighting everyone. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you want me to cover some other games. I am planning to make a video on ReZero soon, so keep your eyes out for that. And I might cover Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League after that, so hey, keep your eye out for that if you want. Sorry about this video taking so long. Unfortunately, the Dragon Ball Z art style is hard enough where drawing it for so long takes a long time. In the meantime, if you guys are interested, check out my video on why I think Phin is a bad character in Spider-Man Miles Morales. Or if you're up for more Persona style games, then check out my video on why I think the Lover's boss fight is a bad one. This is Demonically Inspired, signing out.